What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, October 3rd, 2016, getting into the month of October. Halloween's coming on up. And all the little kiddies in the neighborhood will be running their little extortion racket. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. But I'm going to ask you again, hold off on the calls unless it's really important. Don't just call in to tell me I'm a great guy or hear your own voice on the radio, because otherwise we won't get through most of the talking points, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Mike is in our control room as usual, twiddling our dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, the corporate media is, again, on the warpath against Donald Trump, and their latest thing is the New York Times got a hold of and published Donald Trump's tax returns, in which it shows that he paid no taxes for blah, 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 blah. Now, what Donald Trump did is the same thing any other businessman will do. He had a huge loss in 1 year. Back when the economy was not doing well, a lot of businesses lost a lot of money, and under the rules, he's allowed to carry that loss forward and deduct it from revenues in later years to reduce his tax liability. And so what he did was legal. It's the letter of the law, and yet the corporate media is out there saying, see, it shows that he's refusing to pay his fair share, and they're all out there. And then the latest embarrassment, of course, was when it came on out that Hillary Clinton did exactly the same thing. Because if you're making the kind of money where you're hiring tax experts, they're going to tell you this is what you do. It's allowed to do. It's allowed. You're allowed to do this. Hillary was using the same tax reduction mechanism. It isn't a scheme. It isn't a scam. It's not like Donald Trump had an offshore tax haven. In fact, they couldn't find anything in there other than that he managed, or his accountants rather, managed his taxes properly. Now, Ann Coulter is out there saying, you know something, outside of the corporate media that is anxious to find anything they can use against Donald Trump, nobody cares about his taxes. Nobody really cares. America is turning to other things, and a big part of corporate media control over your mind for your entire lifetime is the media telling you what you should think is important and what you shouldn't think is important. You know, innocent victims of U.S. wars, nah, it's not important. Aborted babies, oh, very important. Illegal immigrants, nah, not worth thinking about. Multiculturalism, oh, very important. Which restroom do you have to use? Oh, very important. But as the media starts to lose the battle for the minds of America, we the people are suddenly saying, hold on. Don't tell me what I should care about and not care about. I'm going to start making up my mind about that. And people aren't finding Donald Trump's legal tax maneuvers of interest. They're not finding the fact that he may have said something to hurt the feelings of the illegal immigrants a while back. Americans are finding that out-of-control pay-to-play corruption at the Clinton Foundation and the White House, that's important. The war agenda, that's important. A lot of dead bodies all over the place. That's important. The fact that the corporate media is fully on board with the establishment against Donald Trump, that's very important. The fact that we're living in a corrupt fascist dictatorship, yeah, that's pretty darned important. And a big part of what the media has lost, along with the trust and faith of the American people, is that ability to tell the American people what they should think is important. And we're deciding for ourselves. And that means they really have indeed lost the war for the minds of America. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Everybody's screaming about, oh, Donald Trump broke the law, Donald Trump broke the law. Blah, blah, blah. Turns out, the New York Times, in publishing Trump's taxes without his express permission, as required by the Internal Revenue Service, they broke the law. And apparently there was an internal memo in which the New York Times lawyers warned the publishers, you're going over a line here. You're into an area of legal exposure, and they went ahead and published Trump's taxes anyway, along with that, oh, see, he refuses to pay his fair share. Actually, he did pay his fair share. Nobody found any problems in the taxes at all. But the New York Times is now facing legal trouble. Now, they, like James Comey and Loretta Lynch and all these other people, are literally betting that they're going to be able to steal the election for Hillary Clinton, in which case they don't have to worry about being prosecuted for their crimes, because that's going to be the hallmark of the Hillary Clinton presidency. The big criminals will never, ever be prosecuted for anything that they've done. Of course, if Donald Trump gets a huge landslide that even the vote stealers cannot overcome, then the New York Times is looking at a lawsuit against the corporation itself and the publishers who knowingly, willfully broke the law by publishing his taxes. Trump could sue them. He could wind up the owner of the New York Times. But it has become the hallmark of Hillary's campaign, her career, and her potential presidency, that the big criminals are protected. They're going to get those climate deniers. They're going to get those small criminals. We'll make examples of them, so that you're not paying attention to the fact that the biggest criminals in our history are getting off scot-free, just like during Prohibition. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. We're talking about politics and corruption. We're talking about how the New York Times may have exposed itself to a major business-ending lawsuit by publishing Donald Trump's taxes without his permission. And as I said, we've got all these people breaking the law, and they're gambling that Hillary Clinton is going to steal the White House so that they don't have to worry about being prosecuted. So that's what's going on here. Lou Dobbs is out there saying this election is our last chance against the globalist New World Order. It's our last chance to have a peaceful revolution in this country against a thoroughly corrupt system, top to bottom, left to right, back to front. Washington, D.C. is in dire need of an enema. And remember what John F. Kennedy said about revolutions. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And I'm not advocating it, but I'm running out of ways to try and stop it. Now, another leaked audio from Hillary Clinton. She's out there on the warpath against the Second Amendment. She's saying the Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment. It's a collective right only. And she's talking about the Heller decision. Now, here's the situation. Every right that is acknowledged by the Bill of Rights is an individual right. When they talk about the right to freedom of speech, it's an individual right for you personally to say what you want to say. It's not a collective right, meaning that speech is only allowed by government institutions. I'm sure Hillary Clinton would like to change that. But that was the basis for the Supreme Court to say the Second Amendment is an individual right because every other right enumerated in the Bill of Rights is an individual right. And Hillary Clinton's out there saying the Supreme Court is wrong. And when I get Loretta Lynch on the Supreme Court, we'll get those gun people in the United States, and we'll just take all their guns away from them, and we'll give them to the terrorists in Syria and the Mexican drug cartels, because business with the drug cartels is so good right now. Now, as you know, FBI Director Comey is testifying before multiple committees in Congress over his investigation, and I use that term very, very loosely, of Hillary Clinton and her email server. Now, one of the big scandals everybody's talking about, the FBI and the Justice Department, that's Comey, who gave HSBC that sweetheart deal on the drug money laundering, and James Comey, who was on the board of HSBC when they were laundering the drug money, see how all the linkages are going, basically gave Cheryl Mills, who was the subject of a criminal investigation at that time, to participate as a lawyer on behalf of Hillary Clinton, the principal subject of that same criminal investigation. This has never been allowed before. It's a violation of basic investigative protocols and attorney ethics rules. It's also a violation of federal criminal law. And yet James Comey and Loretta Lynch are saying they were powerless to object. Really? that implies they were being given orders from higher up, meaning the White House, and that's obstruction of justice, and that's an impeachable offense. Now, Trey Gowdy has gone after James Comey for his recommendation not to press charges against Hillary Clinton. Now, James Comey is still taking the position that they couldn't prove intent to do wrong. But, again, under Title 18, Section 793, intent is not required. If you expose U.S. national security information through negligence, and James Comey said Hillary was being careless, reckless, and negligent, that alone is good for 10 years in prison and banning from holding public office ever again. So that's what's going on. And so Trey Gowdy basically comes after James Comey and he says, what would Hillary have to have done to get you to recommend prosecution? And Comey basically just didn't really have a response to that. Now, Gohmert has forced James Comey to admit the FBI kind of faked the Hillary Clinton investigation. The FBI did things in a way they've never done before, and they gave out immunity agreements to all these people that weren't really necessary to basically make it impossible to charge any of these people. Now, here's where it gets very interesting. A newly surfaced side deal, side agreement, involves the laptops that were used by Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson. Now, supposedly James Comey or Loretta Lynch gave Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson immunity deals in exchange for the laptops. They did not need to do that. They could just have subpoenaed the laptops. That was a legitimate way to do. Handing these immunity deals basically meant if anything was found on the laptops, it couldn't be used as evidence against either of those two. And here's where it gets really weird. According to a just-released letter from the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Bob Goodlatte, to Attorney General, the FBI had side deals that after they did whatever search they did on the laptops, they would physically destroy the laptops. That's destruction of evidence. But that was the deal they made. Here's immunity. Let us look at the laptop so it looks like we're having an investigation, and after we're all done pretending to have an investigation, we will destroy these laptops and every bit of information on them. The FBI has never, ever done anything like that before. And we have posted to WhatReallyHappened.com the actual letter to Attorney General Lynch from the House Judiciary Committee saying that she has until October 10th to respond to 4 questions. Why did the FBI agree to destroy these 2 laptops? And number 2, doesn't the willingness of Ms. Mills, and Ms. Samuelson to have their laptops destroyed contradict their claim that the laptops could have been withheld because they contained non-relevant privileged information? Doesn't that undermine the claim that the side agreements were necessary? 3, have these laptops or the contents of the laptops in fact been destroyed, making follow-up by Congress impossible? And then they go on to say that for both Cheryl Mills and Samuelson's laptops, provide in detail how many total documents were reviewed, how many were privileged, and they go on and on and on. Congress is not sitting still for this. This is absolutely absurd. All right, let's go ahead and take a phone call from Mark in Oregon. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good. You sound fine. You sound like an extreme live wire here.
Well, that good Kona coffee. What can I tell you?
Yeah, and good news. Good news. I like all the good news that's happening right now. Relative to that, Mike, is what you've been talking about, of course, things coming to the surface and being jumped on by the alternative media, which is not just the alternative media communications, excellent communications such as yours, but also such fine, upstanding, honorable gentlemen as Julian Assange.
Mm-hmm.
What we're looking at, I called you a couple of weeks ago, Mike, and I had mentioned that I thought that things had at that time reached a tipping point, and that is, I'll reiterate it, repeat it, that the more that the other side does to try to cover up what's being exposed, the more they're going to be exposed. It's just going to be, their efforts are going to be a catalyst to exposure in a shorter time frame. And I like that
Yeah, people
have
picked up on it. They understand that the entire corporate establishment is against Donald Trump, and part of the American character is to side with the underdog, to side with the person that you see is the victim of cheating and unfair play. And that is why the harder they try and bash Donald Trump, the more and more people are going to him. The undecideds are swinging his way. He's picking up larger and larger shares of the black and Hispanic vote. People just don't like Hillary Clinton and what she represents and what she will represent for the future of this country, which is basically to continue on down this same insane path we've been following for the last 30 years.
Yes, if Donald Trump was truly an underdog, he wouldn't have the vast popularity that he has, contrary to the fake polls that, of course, they're lining up and conjuncting between the two candidates to be very close, of course, so they can steal the election, as they've done before that way. The larger issue, I think, with Donald Trump is that he's actually in the right 100%, so that people will gravitate toward him as they see the other side's fakery and lies and cheating in all areas concerned with Hillary Clinton and concerned with her becoming president of the United States, because they know, the people at large know, that if she does, it'll be a continuation of what has been going on, but at a much faster pace, just from what Hillary Clinton has revealed. If you select out different quotes that she's made in public concerning the economy, which is basically nothing, concerning her lies to the FBI that were exposed by James Comey. He did do a little bit of good work there. But, Mike, they are absolutely desperate. And when they're desperate, they make moves that can easily be traced at this time because of the scrutiny that is being brought to bear upon them and their deeds. We're actually exposing them in real time here. So it gets to a point, Mike, to finish up, where I think that the only choice they're going to have left, as the way things stand right now, in order to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president and to save their new world order and to not be put back some more years indefinitely to the accomplishment of it and the co-joining of the social, economic, and political order in this world, is to overturn the chess table, so to speak. And that's a very dim prospect, black prospect that we can all have to look at because they are extremely desperate. And as they become more desperate, I think they're going to see an out in actually creating a fairly large to a very large terrorist attack. And I don't know.
Or they could just start an outright hot war with Russia and China. I think that's on the table right now because a war is going to work against Hillary, but an economic implosion would work even more against her because of the fact that she's been saying the economy is fine, and, if you're not doing well, it's because you're being oppressed by the GOP and all the rest of it. But they are feeling very cornered, and what is really dangerous about Hillary becoming president is we will all know that she stole it. And she's going to be looking at 4 years of this kind of digging into her past by the independent media. So she's going to have to figure some way to end the First Amendment along with the Second Amendment and actually become a true tyrant and dictator, or she won't get through the first 4 years, even if her health does hold up. Anyway, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And over the commercial break, I solved a little mystery. You probably were hearing that beeping that was going off in the background during the first hour, and I wasn't sure what it was. It turns out our smoke alarm, the battery was low, and it makes a racket to remind you to change the battery, which I've already done, so hopefully that will be the end of that. Now, getting on back to the scandals, there's a report coming out from the General Services Administration Inspector General documenting how Obama operatives impeded, delayed, disrupted Freedom of Information Act requests. Apparently, they spent something like $37 million of your money to block your right to look at what they're doing with your money and your children and so forth. Apparently, sought ways to punish Judicial Watch for daring to ask impertinent questions. You know, like the people have a right to know. What kind of nonsense is that? This is a dictatorship. You sit down, give us your money and your children, and shut up. Now, Judicial Watch, of course, has come on out saying that, yes, Hillary can be impeached for things she did wrong, both as a senator and a Secretary of State. The fact that she's out of office doesn't alter the fact she can be impeached. And they're saying FBI Director Comey could be sued, just flat out sued. Hillary Clinton can go to jail. And James Comey is probably the most corrupt FBI director since J. Edgar Hoover himself. And it's not just, the entire system is corrupted. It's not just Department of Justice, it's not just the FBI, it's all of them. And here's a good example. Not too long ago, there was an email that came on out from State Department aide Jake Sullivan and a Clinton Foundation employee exposing financial conflict of interest by the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. This had to do with Clinton insider trading involving Greek bonds and Hillary Clinton's son-in-law Mark Mezvinsky. Well, the State Department is now saying, we lost the email. We're sorry. It was here a minute ago, and we can't find it. Now, the text of the mail has already been made public on the Internet, but the position of the government is if they don't have an official copy, then it's not valid in court, because who knows what those Internet people did with that. So the State Department is just losing inconvenient emails. Isn't that amazing? Now, there is a nonpartisan group, a watchdog group, the Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust, and they have declared Hillary Clinton the most corrupt politician of 2015, and I'm sure over at the Hillary Clinton office they're going, we're number one, we're number one, we're number... Wait a minute, what was this again? All right, we're going to go ahead and start a phone call with George in Texas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing okay. Now that I know what that beeping was, that was kind of freaking me out.
You know, the thing is, I hope they have a fire alarm that says that has voice activation saying, "I'm just cooking," instead of having to put it in the refrigerator.
I remember I had this girlfriend where I had to sit her down and say, you know, that is a smoke detector. It's not a cooking timer.
Yeah. But anyway, you know, the thing is, in the Trump administration, I just hope one of the things on top of the list of things to reform is banking reform. And I could tell you right now, I am livid because I had a cashier's check I took to my bank to deposit.
Yep.
And they made a whole bunch of excuses. Well, this is an out-of-state cashier's check. We're going to have to put a 7-day hold on it. I called the place where the original cashier's check was drafted. Oh, and they said that check cleared that very day. So they've been sitting on my money for 6 days.
Yeah, they're using it. They're rolling their receivables. You know, they're trying to maintain the illusion of maintaining their minimum cash requirements under the law, but they're doing it with other people's money. The whole banking industry is a bunch of crooks. There's this wonderful movie called The International. We posted a clip from it at What Really Happened in connection with one of the stories, where there's this gentleman who's in there saying the essence of the banking industry is to keep us all, whether we are nations or individuals, slaves to debt. That's what the banks are, an enslavement mechanism. Okay? George, hang on the phone. I'm going to come back to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the media, in between bashing on Donald Trump, is making a big deal over the story of Kim Kardashian, who got robbed at her luxurious flat in Paris. And the big thing about that. And they're using that to not report on what's going on in the war zones and with the economy. My only comment about that, I'm not a big celebrity watcher, and I could care less about the Kardashians. But my comment is, what a shame she was not allowed to carry a gun for self-defense. All right, let's go back to George in Texas. I agree with you that we need banking reform, but how do you reform a criminal organization? Because that's what people are beginning to understand. I'm not talking about the mom and pop depositor banks, which are a force for organization and good within the community. I'm talking about these private central banks that go into a country, they arrogate control of the money supply, and then they just start creating money out of thin air, and they loan it to you at interest. And it's just a device to enslave the nation and its people. That's all it is.
Well, you know, the thing is, when that money gets posted in my account, I'm closing that account, and I'm going over to the credit union, which has much better reviews from customers than the bank does.
Well, you know, at this point, the big chain banks are all in trouble. They've got their own exposures to what's starting to happen over in Europe. And my advice, I mean, we unfortunately do live in a society where you have to have a bank. I would go with the small, little, independent mom-and-pop depositor bank in your neighborhood and stay away from those big chains because they're all in serious trouble. We're going to be talking about that in a little bit. George, I'm going to let you go. I got two more calls I want to get out of the way, and then I want to get back to the news. Frank in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Mike, thanks for taking my call. Concerning the situation with the FBI director refusing to prosecute Hillary Clinton, the vast majority of Americans pretty much know how the criminal justice system works. We've been involved, either sat on jury pools or grand jury or maybe even been charged. And what the American people, I really think, fail is that the evidence put before the FBI director should have been just held and impanel a grand jury and then lay the evidence before a grand jury and have them make the decision either to indict or not indict. They didn't even get that far, Mike.
No, they didn't.
He stopped.
He would not have allowed a grand jury to hear the evidence, so they would have come down with an indictment. You know, Director Comey and Loretta Lynch's job was to protect Hillary Clinton and her staff, and that's exactly what they did while trying to make it look like it was a real investigation. And on that latter part, they have failed miserably. We all know it's a cover-up and a whitewash from beginning to end.
You're exactly right. And this is what irks the people, because the common people, like us out here in Hinterland, know how the system works. And we pretty much know that, you know, if you don't impanel a grand jury of their peers, you know, and lay the evidence before them, and then if they, like you said, if there's enough evidence to indict, well, let the chips fall where they may. He stopped it even before that segment. That's where we feel the system is rigged. Now, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an independent, but I'm just calling it the way I see it, is that they're really stopping due process in the justice system from operating the way we understand it, how it's supposed to operate. It's what pisses off the people, Mike.
Well, like I said, we're seeing a repeat of the corruption that we saw during Prohibition, where those who were trafficking in alcohol had enough money to buy and bribe their way to the top levels of the government. We're seeing the same thing today with the narcocracy, and that's really what at stake. Loretta Lynch gave HSBC that wrist slap punishment for laundering drug money. James Comey was on the board of HSBC when the drug money laundering was going on. HSBC is tangled up with the Clinton Foundation. We're seeing the face of the drug corruption that has poisoned our nation since the mid-1980s and the CIA's gun and drug running operation into Nicaragua. It is a long, continuous history, and now everybody's beginning to understand that it really is corrupt. You know, anybody who's sitting on their rear end waiting for somebody in the government to do the right thing, it is not going to happen. Anybody who might be interested in doing the right thing has either been driven out of government or they've been killed. That's exactly where we are right now.
You know, Mike, this, it's interesting you bring up that point. I know you got to go, but this is a point I think the people should know. I remember when Hillary Clinton was running for New York senator, and she was campaigning around New York State, and there was a interesting article from one of the offbeat papers. I can't remember the name, and they had reported that during the 90s, after the Clintons signed the crime bill, that they had a blind trust that invested heavily in private prisons. You know, it was a blind trust that, you're not supposed to know where the money is going.
Yes.
But the legislation that her husband had signed with this crime bill vastly expanded the amount of private prisons in the United States. And if you were invested in that stock, you made out pretty darn well.
Well, hang on a second. Let's get back to the blind trust issue, because we know that the Bill Clinton presidential blind trust was fraudulent. They did not, in fact, put all their wealth in there, and we know that because during the Whitewater hearings, one of the White House staff testified that in the residence portion of the White House was a filing cabinet full of the Clintons' financial papers, and it should not have been there under the terms of the blind trust. The blind trust was fraudulent, and I think that was the motive for the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, because he was tasked with setting up the paperwork, the blind trust, getting it over to the trustees, and he stalled because he knew that if he signed the blind trust as the preparer and it was later exposed as a fraud, he was the one who was going to go to jail, and it looks like he was just going to resign and say, I want out of here, this is in too deep, I'm at too much of a risk. And that would have brought more attention to the fact that the blind trust was fraudulent. So he was killed, dumped in Fort Marcy Park, and some unknown party completed the blind trust documents 3 days later and turned them in. And we don't know who it was. It was probably Hillary Clinton, I would suspect. But I think that was the primary motive for the murder of Vince Foster, was to protect the fact that the presidential blind trust was a fake. And as I said, it came out later in the Whitewater testimony anyway.
Well, you just made the case. The people that are independent out there getting ready to vote, I cannot vote for this woman. I can't see any true, honest American person voting for this individual. There's been so much scandals in their 30 years in public office.
Well, you need to remember something. Dead people don't really think these things through clearly, and that's why Hillary Clinton is now counting on the zombie vote to put her over the top in November.
Well, you're blessed with wit, Mike. Thank you so much for taking my call. You're exactly right.
All right. Thank you very much here. And, remember, the dead can vote, but they can't show up at conventions and buy her book or the rest of it, but they can vote. So the zombie vote is now what she's betting on. We're going to talk to Dustin in New Jersey, and then we're going to close the phone lines for a bit while I get the rest of the news out there. Dustin, what's going on?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but with this corruption, Mike, and we're going to have a world war. I'm telling you, Mike, because
I know
we got such corruption at the level that we see, and the arrogance and ignorance, man. Mike, I really have a bad feeling.
Well, these are excellent criminals, but they're lousy managers. And if they get us into a real shooting hot war with Russia and or China, the United States is going to lose it, even if it does go nuclear.
And you see Russia is drilling in Moscow from the 4th to the 7th, 40 million people who live in Moscow to go into the shelters. So the Russians know what's coming. It's too bad most Americans don't, because the media is putting Kim Kardashian crap out,
Yeah, they are. Well, there's a reason for that. Okay, the U.S. government has abandoned protecting the American people in the event of a nuclear attack. I'm sure there's still a whole bunch of those civil defense shelters that are around there, but I remember not too long ago there was a big stink over the fact that these underground shelters that were designated places to go in case of a nuclear attack, all the supplies in them had rotted decades ago. They weren't being maintained. They weren't being kept up. The only bomb facilities that are being maintained are the ones that are set aside for the government itself. The Greenbrier, they've reactivated that. Mount Weather, whatever facility it is they've got under the Denver airport, whatever it is they built in the middle of the mountain up here on the H3. They're constantly being restacked and resupplied. But as for ordinary Americans, well, you're just out of luck because you're just not important to them anymore.
Yeah, I guess 7-Eleven we can head down to. That's our local fallout shelter. Woohoo!
Yeah, really. Well, you know, we joke about it, but the reality is Claire and I have a first strike nuclear target for both Russia and China just a couple of miles out that window. And so obviously we're very concerned about this. We're very, very concerned about this entirely. Even if it doesn't go nuclear, I expect that Pearl Harbor will get hit because all of the communications for the entire Pacific go through Pearl Harbor. So it's obviously going to be a target, and Claire and I unfortunately have a ringside seat. When we first moved out here so that I could work on the film Day After Tomorrow, I deliberately put us into a part of the island where we would be reasonably safe from attacks on Oahu's military bases. Unfortunately, during the real estate froth-up and everything, we were forced to move, and we're in a very, very lovely place right now at a really good, rent. But it doesn't change the fact that we've got a ringside seat to a potential nuclear target, and that does tend to keep me up at nights.
And there's not enough suntan lotion you can buy that covers that.
No, the stores are out of the 2 million sunblock right now. Dustin, I'm going to let you go here, and we're going to close the phone lines for a bit because I got to get through this news. It's really, really important. So there was a story that came out of Investment Watch blog, The Shocking New Evidence on Bill Clinton May End the Clintons Forever. The headline is a little overblown because basically what they're doing is they're reporting on how it has turned out that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton really don't spend a lot of time together with each other, and that while Hillary was Secretary of State, Bill was carrying on regular love affairs with 3 different women, which is kind of like reporting that rain fell somewhere in the United States today. It's just kind of expected behavior. But we see the media out there, already responding to the fact that Bill Clinton still cannot keep his fly zipped. They found a cast member of one of Donald Trump's reality shows who's willing to say that Trump made a sexist remark. Oh, horror of horrors, he made a sexist remark. All right, let me ask you a question. Let's say that you're a homeowner and the plumbing breaks in your house. Are you going to choose a plumber who dresses nicely and uses politically correct language and never says anything offensive, or do you want a plumber who knows how to come on in and fix what's really going on? And that's where the American electorate has really been seduced into the dark side of the political discussion. We're supposed to choose our candidates because it's time for a woman president, and we've got to have somebody who doesn't say things that hurt the feelings of the illegal immigrants. No, what America needs right now is somebody who's going to be a good manager. And that's Donald Trump. Now, he may not have always been successful, but he knows how to run businesses. Hillary Clinton does not. All she's known her entire life is selling influence, killing the people who get in her way, starting wars, and talking tough. And we cannot go down that path anymore, or we're really going to have mushroom clouds out our windows. Now, a lot of people at this point are still reeling over yet another embarrassing statement made by Hillary Clinton, where she implied the Bernie Sanders supporters, are just they're living in their parents' basement, and she just dissed them. And needless to say, Hillary was sort of counting on Bernie Sanders to corral his supporters and get them to vote for Hillary, and Bernie Sanders has been loyal about trying to do just that, and it's been an uphill battle, and this did not help. And at this point, we're starting to see a schism break up there because Hillary just canceled a joint campaign event with Bernie Sanders. In fact, it looks like Bernie will not be part of Hillary's campaign for the next month, which is about all that we've got left here. And that means the Bernie Sanders voters, who are already feeling betrayed, first, by Hillary Clinton stealing the primary, and second, by Bernie Sanders appearing to sell out and support Hillary, when Hillary turns around and insults Bernie Sanders supporters, portrays them as inferior. So it just keeps going and going. Now then, everyone talks about the Clinton Foundation. There's actually more than one. There's the Bill and Hillary and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, then there's the Clinton Family Foundation, and they had another one called the American India Foundation. This one was set up to rebuild 100 villages following that massive earthquake that killed 20,000 and injured 166,000. The money poured into this. This was a foundation set up specifically to deal with the aftermath of the India quake. And they had $53 million they raised, of which only $2.7 million ever actually wound up in India. So that's how corrupt it is. They cheated the people of India. They cheated the people of Haiti. They get on in there and say, we're raising money to do this. And then they give a token amount over there, and the rest goes, who knows where? Gets laundered and funds all these PACs. Okay, apparently somebody called on in to ask if we've considered living on the Big Island. I certainly would love to, because it is so big and roomy, and they've got that great observatory. But if we can get the money together, we're actually thinking about moving back to the mainland. That would get Claire some better singers. It would get me closer to all these conferences I'm always being invited to speak at, but nobody can afford a ticket round trip from Hawaii. And that's what we would really like to do. As far as the radiation, we had some surges following Fukushima. At the moment, I'm not doing daily monitoring. Perhaps I should go back to doing that. But my radiation equipment will not measure alpha, and it's not able to do measurements in water, which is the primary vector. Now, we have Julian Assange had announced that this week there was going to be a major Hillary Clinton dump. Then he said it was off because of security concerns. Because if he walks out on that balcony at the Ecuador embassy in London, he's going to wind up like Martin Luther King. Now they've rescheduled. They say it's on for Wednesday. It will be a video dump from an unknown location. More about that when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. One of our listeners just emailed me saying one should remember that all of these basement dweller kids that Hillary is now dissing, they were being born during Bill Clinton's presidency. So if they're still in the parents' basement, it's from the Clintons' policies. They kept them there. Keep them in the basement so the streets are free for all these refugees and illegal immigrants that are going to vote for the Democrats and the bread and circuses. Another article just came on through. I love the smell of burning hypocrites in the morning. As you know, the New York Times has tried to boost the Hillary campaign by publishing Donald Trump's tax returns. It was illegal for them to do so. It's against the law. And they were trying to make a big deal that Donald Trump had almost $1 billion loss in 1995 that allowed him to carry the loss forward and not pay taxes in subsequent years. As it turns out, the New York Times itself has avoided paying taxes as recently as 2014. They paid no taxes. They got an income tax refund of $3.5 million, even though they had a pre-tax profit of $29 million. It was all done with fancy accounting. And so the New York Times really does not have any room to get up there and talk about somebody complying with the tax laws and using the loopholes that are there for the rich, whether it's the Clintons, Trump, or the New York Times. Now then, getting on back to Julian Assange, was going to do a presentation from the Ecuador embassy in London tomorrow. Apparently somebody raised the possibility that he could be assassinated, certainly very real. So now it's put off till Wednesday. It'll be done over video and from an undisclosed location. And there's going to be a huge document dump. Now, interestingly enough, when Hillary Clinton met with her staff in November 23rd, 2010, they were talking about ways to stop WikiLeaks from releasing an enormous batch of 250,000 secret cables dating from 1966 to 2010. And they're in this meeting, and Hillary Clinton just says, can't we just drone this guy? And the room erupts into laughter. And then the laughter fades when everybody realizes Hillary Clinton was serious about this. She was actually saying, let's just drop a drone strike on this guy. Well, here's a little bit of a problem. Throwing a drone strike into the Ecuador embassy is an act of war against Ecuador. Blowing up part of downtown London is not going to be seen very well by the British government, and Hillary was ready to go ahead and do that. Talk about reckless disregard for consequences. Now there's the music. We've got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with more about WikiLeaks after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and we're going to go right ahead and talk to John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Getting on with, I want to talk about 2 subjects. One, the war zones, and the WikiLeaks. If you remember, about a month ago, I pointed out that WikiLeaks had all this information. You didn't quite go along with me. But now it looks like WikiLeaks have really put the Clinton campaign on the defensive. And this latest story about the cancellation of this information that's supposed to kill the Clinton campaign was put out initially by NBC. And that forced Mr. Assange to make a statement in which he said, yes, we're postponing it because there's a fear that I'd be assassinated. And remember, there's already been one attempt. And it took the London police 2 hours to get to that embassy.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. But, I mean, basically, what I've learned through other avenues is that already many of the alternative media have already got the files and paperwork, the emails, encrypted, that is, and on tomorrow, WikiLeaks will send the key to decrypt all the files. That's before Mr. Assange goes on his video trip, from where to where, we don't know, to explain all the information within those emails and documentation.
Okay, well, I have something to insert here because apparently another listener has called in saying that Alex Jones is saying that the document dump is going to occur at 2 a.m. tomorrow morning. We don't know what time zone that is, but basically Assange has now pushed it up, and it's going to happen early tomorrow.
That's what I'm saying. It's going to happen tomorrow. The document dump tomorrow, but the decryption will be sent later, so that they can decrypt it. They've got a day to look at it before the video. Now I want to get onto the war zones, particularly what's coming out of France, America, and various other Britain. They're in a blind panic over Aleppo because the Syrian Arab Army and the air forces of Russia and Syria are really making rapid progress. The problem they have is, we know there's French special forces, American special forces, British special forces, Saudi special forces are in that enclave.
Yes.
And are likely to be killed during this massive onslaught. How are these nations who are telling their people, we don't have boots on the ground, how are they going to explain the deaths of all these people, these hundreds of special forces that are in there?
Well, the same thing they did when that foreign intelligence command post was destroyed by a Russian ship-launched cruise missile. They'll just tell us all about how Kim Kardashian got held up in her Paris flat, and they'll just pretend it really wasn't an issue. Anyway, listen, John, I don't want you to jump the gun here and sort of steal the thunder from what I have to say about the war zones here. So we're going to let you go and switch over here to Brent in Dallas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha. this is not current affairs, but I would just like to compliment you on your solution idea of having many nations. I think that is a good concept and could be applicable in the future. And then we could redraw the boundaries. I'm going to recommend using a compass and just draw circles, and we'll worry about the overlaps later.
Well, I think trying to redraw all the borders might provoke a backlash. I think we'd be better off just looking at some of the larger, more aggressive troublemaking nations like the U.S. Being balkanized. Maybe break it into 3 or 4 pieces. And
well, that's what they're doing right now. You look to Romania, they have plans if you get a chance to look into Romania and its history. But I just wanted to compliment you. I'm very interested in that plan for the future.
All right. Well, I think after the election is over, especially if Trump is able to pull off a miracle, I think it'll be time to start talking in detail about the blueprint for the new America and move it along, okay? So thank you very much for the call. Okay. I'm going to let you go here, and we're going to get on back to talking about what we're going to be talking about. Now, we're already getting teased about what is coming out in this next document dump, and WikiLeaks is now confirming they have the proof that Hillary Clinton sold weapons to ISIS. Now, this is not the first time this has come on out. This was mentioned in some of the State Department documents pried loose by Judicial Watch. It was in some of the other leaked emails that came on out through DNC leaks and the earlier WikiLeaks dump. But Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, at the same time they're telling you you may not be allowed to have guns, were sending weapons to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria, are declared enemies in the war on terror, and that is the legal definition of treason. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're still talking about politics. We're talking about the coming WikiLeaks dump that apparently we're being told will have some game changers in there. But in the end, the corporate media will ignore it. They'll say it's no big deal. They'll wag Kim Kardashian at us or some other such nonsense. Because what we're seeing here is the narcocracy, a government corrupted by drug money fighting for its survival against we, the American people. And again, go back and look at what happened during Prohibition. And all that money that poured on in from the trade in alcohol, and the gangsters would buy legitimate businesses, including things like newspapers, in order to control public perception of what was going on. And if you will remember, back in the 30s and 40s, the gangsters from Prohibition, they were being romanticized in films. They were almost made into counterculture heroes, modern Robin Hoods, and they were nothing like that. Now, getting on to the current numbers, first of all, forget the polls and the corporate media. We know they're all being faked. They're simply going on out and they're oversampling Democrats, women, minorities to get the numbers they want to convince you that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are tied neck and neck in order to make it easy for them to steal the election for Hillary, and you'll say, oh, well, it was too close to call. That's what we're going to be hearing for the next month until the election. It's too close to call. It's too close to call. No, it isn't. Donald Trump, in every poll not connected with the corporate media outlet, is ahead by a landslide. And even the polls being run by affiliate stations in their own neighborhood are swinging toward Donald Trump. The black vote is swinging toward Donald Trump. Donald Trump right now is leading Hillary among independent voters, not aligned with either party, 41% to 29%. Down in Florida, major state, Donald Trump has 33% of the black vote and 52% of the Hispanic vote. And I'll tell you why that's happening. Because the legal Hispanic citizens in this country are sick and tired of all the negative fallout from the illegal immigrants. They don't want to be confused with them. These are people who came to the United States legally. They went through the process. They established themselves. They've got businesses. They're doing very well here. And they don't want all these illegals hopping across the border to spoil things for them. Now, up in Ohio, the Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Union has just given Donald Trump their endorsement. He's picking up the law and order vote all across this country. Meanwhile, one of Trump's senior advisors is saying there is a fixed presidential election in the making. He's sounding the warning. We're seeing all the signs during the primaries of massive election fraud. We're seeing all these scandals about, dead people being registered to vote in places like Colorado and Virginia. There was another article that came on out that's found 2.7 million people registered to vote in more than one state. They can vote on one side of the border, skedaddle across the other side of the border, vote again. Beware the walking dead voters. That's what's coming on down here, the zombie vote. That's what Hillary Clinton is counting on to put her over the top here. So apparently the FBI has launched another investigation about dead people voting in the swing state of Virginia. Of course, if Comey has anything to say about it, they're going to come out and say, oh, it's no big deal. It couldn't possibly change the outcome. And aren't you sick and tired of hearing that? Because every time there's been an election, and there's been election fraud obvious to everybody, what does the corporate media tell you? Oh, it didn't change the outcome. That's the most ridiculous thing they could ever possibly say, because if you have found some election fraud, you cannot know you found it all. And those who engage in election fraud do intend for it to change the outcome. In other countries, if the exit polls and the official results differ by more than 2%, it's seen as a sign of election fraud. But here in the United States of America, the corporate media will tell you, oh, well, the voters are lying to the exit pollsters. They were ashamed of their vote. They don't want to be seen as racist or sexist, and so they lied to the exit polls. That's ridiculous. In all of my years of going to elections and being exit polled, I've never met an exit pollster that I actually knew. And hence, I don't care what they think about me. Apparently, in 8 Virginia counties, more than 1,000 illegals are registered to vote. This came out of Fox and Friends. But remember, if you ask to see ID, you're being repressive and racist and all this other really bad stuff here. Apparently, there's one guy, Andrew Spiels, is a Hillary supporter and got caught registering dead people to vote. That's why the media keeps saying Hillary could win this thing when Donald Trump is pulling more than 10 times as many people to his rallies, because the dead can vote in the United States, but they can't go to rallies. They can't buy Hillary's book. They can't be bothered to show up for the online polls that are not connected with the media. Meanwhile, we have the Department of Homeland Security trying to reassure us all this election will be honest and above board. They're reminding election officials to basically beef up cybersecurity around the polling places here, because those Russian hackers are coming on in. But voter ID laws, which would go a long way to stopping this fraud, are still being struck down across the nation. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Doing okay.
Good, good. Just 2 quick questions. But first, going back to your Hollywood days, another program that I really enjoy is Mannix with Mike Connors and Gail Fisher.
Yes.
Did you ever get a chance to meet either of them?
No, I didn't, but I did get to meet the guy who was playing Mannix's boss, although I'm blanking on his name. He was also in The Matrix, and I think he actually won an Emmy for that show.
Yeah, he was actually on season 1. That was before they changed not the plot, but Mannix got his own office beginning in season 2. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, it's an Italian guy who was his boss in season 1.
Yeah, okay, so Why is this germane to the current discussion?
Oh, I just wanted to ask you because I just enjoy that show. That's all. I wanted to ask you. I'd like Trump to ask Hillary in the next debate. Hillary, do you believe that illegal aliens have the right to vote in this country? I'd just like him to pose that question to her.
That's a good one.
See how she answers it.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. He needs to put her on the spot. The problem is the way these debates are being set up is to limit interaction and not allow Donald Trump to ask her any questions. That's why Hillary had that little nose stroke thing on the first debate, is that anytime it looked like Donald Trump was going to ask her a question, the moderator would leap in to say the segment is over, or we've talked about this enough, we need to do this, and, Donald Trump, have you stopped beating your wife? A simple yes or no answer, please.
Yeah.
And Hillary Clinton, what is your favorite color?
I just love to see how she would answer that question. Lastly, is there one book on the JFK assassination that you would recommend? Just one?
No, I can't say that there is, because all of these books have a part of the overall, but each one misses some of the aspects of it. Part of it is that these books are always looking for a single source of the plan for the assassination, and the essence of a really good conspiracy is that responsibility for it, decision-making, the supply for it, is across multiple parties in order to give each party plausible deniability. In the case of John F. Kennedy, the people who wanted him dead were the CIA, because Kennedy wanted to smash the CIA after the Bay of Pigs. The Texas oil billionaires did not like him because of the oil depletion allowance issue. Israel wanted John F. Kennedy out because he was blocking Israel's acquisition of nuclear weapons. The Federal Reserve wanted Kennedy out because of Executive Order 11110. The organized crime wanted him out. They felt that he betrayed them because they had helped him steal the election from Richard Nixon, and then he turned around and made his brother Attorney General and sent them after organized crime. And so you had all these different parties that were providing bits and pieces of the support to get this thing done. And what they do is anytime somebody was getting too close to one aspect, they would drop evidence to lead people in the other direction, to keep everybody just sort of bouncing around between all the players without realizing it really was all the players working together.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Israel, because I just discovered a book. It's actually available online, called Final Judgment by Michael Collins Piper.
Yeah, that is a good one. That is a good one.
So I think Kennedy wanted inspections or something of the sort, and Ben-Gurion and the Israeli leaders were dead set against it, and that could have been a reason for their involvement. Who knows?
Well, John F. Kennedy did not want Israel to get nuclear weapons anyway. He saw it as a major destabilization of the Middle East. But Israel knew that Lyndon Johnson would be much more amenable to Israel acquiring nuclear weapons. And so that was Israel's motivation in there. And you had all these other players at the same time. And it's like I keep saying, assassinations and wars are never really started for just one reason. What happens is you'll get a large group of people with their own particular agendas, but the agenda overlaps on the same act, whether it's an assassination or a war. And when that happens, that's when assassinations and wars happen. It's never for one reason. And the ordinary people are not supposed to know what the real reasons were for anybody. It was a crazed, lone nut assassin. It was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. It was the sinking of the Lusitania. It was the dastardly surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. And by the time those events actually happened, the war has already been agreed on. Okay?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to take Bob in Colorado real quick before the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. How are you? I just wanted to let you know you mentioned something about Alex Jones with the dumping. Yes, he supposedly got some information somewhere, and he is going live tonight at 2 o'clock because the information is supposed to be dumped around 2:30, 3 o'clock. I think he said Central Time, on Mountain Time. I'm in Colorado.
Okay.
So he is actually doing his show tonight at 2 o'clock. Supposedly he's got the information. And one thing I know, Mike, I listen to you every day. I listen to him. I listen to Joyce Riley. We all have to come together, man. This is coming down. So I don't care who's giving out the information, whether it's you, Alex, whoever it happens to be. We really need to start paying attention because everybody has the information underground and it's coming out. We need to pay attention. Thank you and aloha.
All right, thank you much. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with some more phone calls after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, and then I'm going to take a pause again and get back to the news because I got a lot of talking points to get through for the rest of the show here. So, Byron in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Aloha, Byron. Are you there?
Hey, this is Alex.
Oh, okay.
Lost Byron.
Okay, we lost Byron. Alex in Florida. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I was just calling to tell you I don't think if we could come up with emails showing that Hillary Clinton gassed children and they're not going to do anything about it.
No, I mean, Hillary Clinton could drop a live kitten into a blender on national TV and CNN would insist that she's pointing out the dangers of kitchen blenders.
I know that. She's already committed enough crimes that if she was going to be prosecuted, it would have already happened. It's obvious that nothing is going to happen.
Well, they're risking a revolution by doing this, by continuing on this path. They're really risking a revolution, and I've been trying to avoid that. But again, it's not really up to me. But I'm hearing so much anger and rage out there that this country very clearly is not running the way that we were all taught it was supposed to. We've become a nation where the big criminals are being protected and ordinary law-abiding Americans are being plundered through civil forfeiture, if not outright murdered by these Israeli-trained police forces.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope that Assange has more than just proof that she sold weapons to ISIS. She probably did. I mean, come on.
Well, we've already had that information out there anyway, and, I get a lot of people saying, why aren't you pushing more for Assange's data release? Well, for one, I wasn't included on his encrypted file dump, and 2, we have been down this road before where Assange teases he's got something big, and it'll come on out, and it's almost a letdown. The actual experience fails to live up to the expectation. And so as far as I'm concerned, when it actually comes out and there's something substantive, then we'll talk about it. But I'm not, Julian Assange is a shameless self-promoter. He always has been. And I'm not going to feed into that any longer. When he comes up with something that actually makes a difference, then I will stand and applaud for him. But until then, he's just not worth the energy involved.
Yeah, and I have a feeling he could come out with big stuff and it's not going to matter. But that's just my opinion. I guess we're going to have to see if he does come out with something. I'm already kind of let down that he's been saying this for a month and nothing's happened.
Yeah. Well, I remember it was supposed to come out before that first debate and it didn't happen. So, I get a strong sense that we're being played and manipulated, and I'm just really kind of fed up with all of that nonsense. So I know a lot of people are going to stay up at 2 a.m. to hear Alex Jones' broadcast, but we'll see what's going on there. But I'm not relying on Julian Assange to come up with the deal breaker here. I'm still looking more at Judicial Watch. Or somebody blowing the whistle from inside. We've got 1 month to go, and this election is more than just Republican versus Democrat. It's more than Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton. This is a corrupted, entrenched oligarchy against we, the American people. And if we lose this one, if they steal this from us, then there's a revolution down the road, and there's going to be no way to stop it.
Yeah. Well, they are going to steal it from us.
They're going to try. They're going to try.
Right. Today, I don't believe Hillary Clinton has 35% of the vote. I don't believe it.
Well, right now, even going from the media's own numbers, Donald Trump has already won the presidency in the Electoral College. Hillary is playing catch-up, and that's even by the numbers the corporate media is admitting to, and we know the real numbers are a lot worse.
Yeah, they keep on acting like she's winning now, and it's a scam. I think Donald Trump won the first debate. I think he did a good job. I think he could have hammered her more on
yeah, but the moderator wouldn't let him. The moderator wouldn't let him. And the moderator was there to protect Hillary Clinton, to protect the drug cartel that has been running this country for 30 years. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to close the phone lines for a while. I got to get some news out, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Somebody just wrote on in and said that they've always had an issue with Julian Assange for not standing up for Manning and not interceding to do something that would somehow help. The problem I've had with Assange, why I've always been cool on him, is that only 3 months after he registered the domain WikiLeaks, and before he'd ever actually leaked anything, he was the darling of the corporate media, had his picture on the covers of Time and Newsweek, while blogs that had been around for a decade and had actually exposed government lies were still being ignored, marginalized, even attacked by that same corporate media. And that's why I've always been cool on Assange. What has he really released that has in any way, shape, or form actually changed history? That's the question I have. So we'll see what he's coming out with, and I would love to be delightfully surprised. But I think he's a controlled asset. Now then, getting on back to more recent events here. The media bias is fully on display against Donald Trump in favor of pushing the racism situation. Apparently, in January of this year, Hillary met privately with Black Lives Matter leaders DeRay McKesson and Jonetta Elzie, who were the lead agitators at the Ferguson and Baltimore riots. Now, Black Lives Matter activists are responsible for millions of dollars of public destruction, dozens of attacks on police, innocent pedestrians, and even the corporate media. Now, last Saturday, Black Lives Matter defaced the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. So far, it has not been reported by the corporate media. I'll tell you what the corporate media did, and this is a good example of the bias that's out there. This is from Huffington Post. The headline reads, Trump admits he found 12-year-old Paris Hilton attractive. This is an engineered headline. Huffington Post is hoping that people will just read the headline and ignore the actual story and go away thinking that Donald Trump has the hots for 12-year-old girls. It's a perfect example of headline crafting. Now, this all goes back to an interview Donald Trump did on the Howard Stern show. And Trump says he found Paris Hilton attractive, but that was at the time of the Howard Stern interview, and at that time, she was considered attractive. She had a reality show. Then Trump goes on to say that he first met Paris Hilton when she was 12, and he says right after, I wasn't interested in her at that age. I'm not into that sort of thing. And so the actual body of the article completely contradicts the Huffington Post headline. That's why you got to read these stories all the way through, so that you're not dealing with one of these deceptive headlines that misstate what the actual story is going to be. All right. Now then, somebody on a blog put out a call following the attack on a Trump supporter out in El Cajon, and somebody wanted to see how many people have actually gotten videos of violence toward Trump supporters, and so far, as of the last time I checked, they'd had over 40 videos submitted of Hillary's supporters behaving violently toward Donald Trump supporters. Now, in point of fact, there's another section of Title 18, Section 593, intimidation of a voter. It is a crime to go on out and threaten voters with violence. And there's 40 videos, and we can assume for every one of these cases that was caught on video, there was probably 100 that weren't recorded, weren't documented. This is real brown shirt behavior. This is political thuggism. It's amazing how many people are screaming Donald Trump is the new Adolf Hitler when Hillary's campaign is using the Nazi playbook. Violent thugs that disrupt Trump's rallies, attack Trump's supporters. That's right out of the brown shirt men. Steal the signs. We've got another story that came out of Information Liberation. A group of Hispanic teenagers filmed themselves, first of all, assaulting a white girl, and then stealing Trump signs out of total strangers' lawns. And they're repeatedly shouting, blank Donald Trump, the F word, which I can't say, or the FCC is going to behave very badly toward our on-air affiliates. And just behaving badly all along. Now, proving that Hillary's people cannot learn from past mistakes, this is being reported on Investment Watch blog. Hillary's campaign manager just went on MSNBC and once again described Donald Trump's supporters as deplorable. I'm sorry. Look at Hillary's supporters stealing signs off of lawns. Hillary's turned the Democrats into the party of the petty thieves. Beating up Trump's supporters. It's Hillary's people who are deplorable, not Donald Trump's. And by the way, the use of that word deplorable and the description of Bernie Sanders supporters as losers living in their parents' basement betrays that Hillary Clinton is an elitist. She thinks she's superior to all of you because she's willing to lie, cheat, steal, and kill to get what she wants. And it doesn't make her superior. It makes her a woman willing to lie, cheat, steal, and kill to get what she wants. And to me, that's deplorable. Now, we're getting a report that over the weekend, a man fell to his death in Battery Park City, which is part of Manhattan Island, plunged from the Tribeca Point Tower on River Terrace and died at the scene. The photos are showing he hit hard enough to literally splatter blood all over the outside walls of this building. They're not releasing this guy's name, at least not yet. I'm wondering if he looks like Brian Pagliano. But I want to find out who this guy was and why he found out that gravity is not his friend at basically 11:30 in the morning. Suicides tend to happen late at night. People very rarely kill themselves in the middle of the day when the sun is shining and everything. I want to know who this guy is. The fact that they're not releasing his name, I think, is very, very telling indeed. Now, here's another weird piece. Remember, a while back, there was a guy who fatally shot a relative of Senator Harry Reid in Henderson, Nevada. It was in late August. Today, all charges against the man have been dropped. Department spokeswoman Michelle French confirmed police did not think they had a strong enough case to bother pursuing a murder charge. It's just getting off scot-free. A lot of wet work going on in this country right now. It's a very, very dangerous time for those who refuse to kowtow to the narcocracy. Over in Great Britain, they're still having issues about the child sexual abuse cover-up. I mean, this is now becoming ancient history. The scandal supposedly took place in the 1970s and 1980s. It's been covered up since then. Top lawyer Ben Emerson has been suspended. Apparently he got a little too close to something. And remember, it wasn't just Great Britain. The U.S. had their own such scandal. It was called the Franklin Scandal. And it went right up to the White House. It reached from Boys Town, which was supposed to be this amazing boys' orphanage. They made movies about it. Everybody donated money to it. And apparently young boys were being recruited from Boys Town and made available for the sexual pleasure of very powerful people. There was actually a documentary made about it. Was going to air, was in the TV Guide. And Congress literally went to the TV industry and said, unless you yank this, we will pass laws that will drive you out of business. And the threat was sufficient where the showing of this documentary was canceled. And apparently some unknown party bought up all of the VHS tapes and the master tapes, and they disappeared. But fortunately, there was an editing work tape that survived about this scandal. Now, let's talk about the war zones a little bit. It's getting very, very intense over there. Veteran German politician Willy Wimmer has suggested that the U.S. is pulling Europe and the whole world into an abyss of war in the Middle East, and went on to say that Russia is really the only major power ready to seriously fight terrorism without tangling it all up in regime change. And he's absolutely right about that. Because we know the U.S. isn't actually making war on the terrorists in Syria. They're making war on Syria. The U.S. has been supporting the terrorists. Now, down in Syria, they're putting pedal to the metal. It's go for broke. Syrian army operations against jihadists in Dur Kabaya, West Damascus. They're closing in on that. Syrian army breaks militants' defenses in northern Aleppo. Syrian troops advance further in northern part of Aleppo. And here's what's going on. Damascus and Moscow understand they have from now until election day to scrub the U.S.-backed terrorists out of Syria. Obama will not launch a new direct U.S. military offensive anywhere, as that would work against Hillary Clinton in the election. Russia and Syria understand this, and they're now moving as fast as they can. Secretary of State John Kerry actually admitted at the UN General Assembly in New York that the U.S. war against the legitimate Syrian government is illegal. But what the heck, we've never let that stop us before, so we're going to keep on going. Russia has issued a warning to the U.S. not to attack the Syrian government. If they want to go on in there against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, that's one thing, but we know the U.S. never gets ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It's always a mistake. Oh, we didn't mean to blow up that hospital. Well, Russia blew up the hospital. Story coming out of Global Research up in Canada. The U.S., France, and Britain scrap United Nations diplomacy, embrace terrorism against the people of Syria, and not just against Syria. We remember that warning that came out last week, where the U.S. is saying, we have it on good news, that the terrorists are going to start attacking Russia, unless Russia stops attacking the U.S. terrorists in Syria. Meanwhile, the militant group Ahrar al-Sham has launched hundreds of Grad missiles on the Syrian city of Hama. Now, Ahrar al-Sham is considered one of the moderate rebel groups backed by the United States of America, and the Grad is an unguided missile. You launch it in the general direction, it comes on down. So we know civilians took the brunt of this attack at the hands of a U.S.-supported terror group. Story out of Activist Post. State Department threatens to send Islamic terrorists into Russia. Now, this happened last Wednesday. Everybody's talking about it. John Kirby came on out and said the radical Salafist terrorists in Syria will attack Russian cities unless Russia stops working inside Syria. And these are the groups that are supported by the United States. And so Kirby's statement basically amounts to a threat to wage unconventional war against Russia. This is as close to an open declaration of war as you can get. And, of course, it's being made without Congress, which under the Constitution is the only body able to declare war. But Obama is still following a policy of armed interventions and conflicts. And they're saying at this point he's literally in effect, declared war against Russia for getting in the way of the U.S. regime change agenda. Meanwhile, Turkey is sending 1,000 special forces on a secret mission to secure a security zone across the border. Still not entirely sure what Erdogan is up to, except that since that botched U.S. coup d'etat to remove him, he's not exactly on the U.S. side. He may be getting ready to cut off the U.S.-backed terrorists if they try and retreat into Turkey. Now, there's a story that came out of tricklopedia.gr, and you have to translate the page, but basically somebody leaked photos of the so-called White Helmet Group faking victims of attacks blamed on Assad. And they show the image that the White Hats leaked to the world, and the media carried it. Oh, this poor girl, she was just, horribly scarred by this attack. And then it's linked with the photos showing professional makeup artists putting on the scar, painting her up with blood. It's all a hoax. And as a reminder, it has now been leaked that the Pentagon paid a public relations firm $540 million to make fake terrorist videos. And if anybody from the Pentagon is listening to this, speaking as a visual effects expert, you got cheated. Those videos are not worth $540 million. They could have been done on the budget for a TV commercial. Cheap TV commercial. Now, one of the reasons everybody's trying to move real fast is not just the election. The presidency of the United Nations Security Council rotates. Remember last week when Samantha Power was there saying that Russia's barbarian, they should be kicked off the Security Council? Well, the reason for that is that as of today, Russia assumes the presidency of the UN Security Council and says their top priority is to calm things down in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. In other words, Russia is going to use the Security Council to try and thwart the U.S. attempts at regime change in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Because everybody understands that's what's really going on. More when we come back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, down in Libya, the House of Representatives has sent a message asking for Russia to intervene in Libya. Now, the Tobruk-based House of Representatives is the legitimate government of Libya, elected by the people. They stand in opposition to the UN, U.S.-backed puppet regime that is being forced on the Libyan people. And they're asking Putin to step on in and do for Libya what he has done for Syria, block U.S. puppet rule. And I think we might see that actually happen. But everybody understands what's been going on here. These are not internal revolutions. This is outside agitators causing confusion and disruption so that the legitimate government of all these nations can be brought down and puppet rulers installed on behalf of the United States. They did it to Iraq after the war, tried to do it to Afghanistan. It's not going very well. Libya, Yemen, still trying to do it in Syria. Since the end of World War II, the United States has tried to overthrow foreign governments and replace them with puppet rule 55 times, succeeding about half the time. Successes include the 1953 overthrow of Iran's legitimate government and the imposition of the Shah, which led to the 1979 revolution. Chile in 1973, get rid of the elected government Salvador Allende and put in the dictator Pinochet. This is what the U.S. has been doing, and now the people of the world understand it. And they don't want to go along with it anymore, because if you look at any one of these nations that have been taken over covertly by the United States, life for the ordinary people goes into decline. Because it's all about plundering the nation, just like they're plundering their own people here. Look at the quality of life, standard of living over the last 30 years in this country. And you'll see the same mindset. The only reason to have a civilian population is for them to work and give you wealth. Because you are the leaders, the rulers, the lords of all you survey. Now, speaking of Afghanistan, Taliban fighters have entered the northern city of Kunduz. The Taliban is taking their country back because the Afghanis do not like puppet rule. Funny thing about Afghanistan, I don't know if you remember this or not. The war in Afghanistan was, well, we're going to take a break for top of the hour station identification. When we come on back, more about Afghanistan. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3 here, and we're still holding off the phone calls because I got so much stuff to get through. But I wanted to give you a little background on Afghanistan and how we got in there. And a reminder that Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires because it certainly was for Great Britain and for the Soviet Union and now for the United States. But the reason the U.S. went into Afghanistan goes all the way back to the 1990s, when there was a consortium of oil companies that wanted to build a pipeline across Afghanistan to bring oil and gas down to a tanker terminal in the Indian Ocean. And they went to the government of Afghanistan, the Taliban, who rose to power after Charlie Wilson's war. And by the way, Taliban simply means students. It was young people said, it's our country, we're going to run it. And the Taliban named a reasonable price for the pipeline right-of-way, and the oil companies didn't want to pay it. At one point, they literally said, we can give you a carpet of gold or a carpet of bombs. And the Taliban held firm because they understood a pipeline causes serious transportation disruptions and is an environmental risk, as the people along the Colonial Pipeline just found out recently. So rather than pay a fair market price for the pipeline, this consortium went before Congress and said, we need a new friendly government in Afghanistan. The representative of UNOCAL in that consortium calling for the Iraq War was Hamid Karzai. And following the U.S. invasion and conquest of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai became the installed puppet president. And the oil companies got their pipeline, and American drug lords got a new source of opium. And we have the photos of coalition forces, some of them have the American flag patch, guarding and protecting the opium poppies and shipping the bags of raw opium. It's the heroin. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dan in Washington, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, thanks for taking the call. Well, I just had a quick comment. I don't understand why they go through so much trouble for pipelines, because you can just ship stuff through oil tanker or truck or train, like, the Canadian pipeline. They ship it with either way, It just seems like a lot of trouble for a pipeline.
No, in the long run, a pipeline is a much more economical way of shipping oil and gas, because it is just a pipe. You put it in one end, it comes out the other end. That is it. And certainly when you're dealing about going from one side of a country or continent to the other, pipeline is also a shorter route than going around the bottom of the world in oil tankers. Pipelines don't sink in bad weather. But pipelines can literally reshape the economy of an entire region, and that's why there's so much effort put on them. And they become very, very political. Again, the reason the U.S. wanted to go after Assad in Syria is that he refused permission to build a pipeline across Syria that would have allowed Israel to sell the oil and gas they're stealing from under the Golan Heights to Europe. And obviously Assad was certainly being very reasonable about that. That's like you find somebody burglarizing your home and you loan them your little dolly to help get your TV out to their truck. And so that's what was going on there.
Yeah, it's not the most moral thing, is it? I mean, you know, when you can ship something by boat to kill a bunch of people just because it's more efficient.
Morality doesn't enter into it. You know, the collateral deaths and everything, it's just considered part of the cost of doing business.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty horrible. Do you know, Mike, I guess my question, you're talking about Gaddafi. I know he was one of the richest guys on the planet before this happened, and he had a lot of gold. Have you heard anything about what happened to all Gaddafi's gold?
Well, it wasn't really Gaddafi's gold. It was the gold that was being used to create the gold dinar, which was Libya's new trade currency. And the reason the U.S. Went on in to kill Gaddafi was Gaddafi had thrown out their privately owned central bank. He'd installed a state central bank to manage the public currency as a public utility, and then he had declared this new currency based on value, the gold dinar, and then he said that anybody who wanted to buy Libya's oil would have to pay for it in the gold dinar. And at that point, the U.S. went on in. They killed Gaddafi. They closed the state central bank, imposed a new private central bank on the people of Libya. Libya's oil is back on the world market, only for the U.S. dollar. And the gold that was to back the gold dinar, nobody knows where that went.
Okay, yeah, that was the mystery I was wondering about. Real quick, back to Afghanistan, you know, that Brzezinski, I always hear about that book, The Grand Chess Game, and he was talking about Afghanistan being a central area, that if you control that area, you somehow control the world, and I don't really understand.
No, it wasn't about... First of all, let's do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. We're talking about Afghanistan and oil pipelines and geopolitics. Afghanistan, Zbigniew Brzezinski was still thinking in World War II terms of needing to control access ways on the ground, which Afghanistan very much dominates that whole Central Asia region, and if you do control it, there is so much that has to go through Afghanistan, whether it's a pipeline or a rail line or even just a new superhighway for trade trucks. And that allows you to control what is being traded between the various countries, as well as charging fees for transit and so forth and so on. So that's one of the reasons Afghanistan has always been seen as an important gateway to Asia. And then, of course, there's the opium that Afghanistan is famous for. And that was really what made it kind of central. Brzezinski was also looking at this eventual encirclement of Russia, which meant the U.S. had to control all of those various nations all across that part of Central Asia in order to blockade Russia and keep them from spoiling the U.S. plans.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for answering the question. Appreciate it.
All righty, we're going to take one more phone call, and then we're going to go ahead and close the phone lines again because I'm got a lot of stuff to get to. Steve in California, aloha, what's on your mind?
Well, your last caller mentioned about the pipelines. You were talking about that versus shipping by rail or truck or tanker. You know, the pipelines also bring vulnerability that if you build these things, you're going to have to put, you know, some kind of guards on them to watch them because they're very vulnerable to sabotage. You know, so that's the kind of thing that I was worried about. And I was really wondering a long time ago why the rail system is so vulnerable also. Our rails are falling apart. They're really an easy target. You really look at them.
Well, it depends on where these things are routed, and generally you will see the rail lines and the pipelines basically going through territory where there are not a lot of players. In the event of a war, yes, bombers will target the pipeline and the rail system and the dams as well.
Yep. Right. That's it, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks. We're going to close the phone lines again. I want to get back to some of this stuff. Now, anti-nuclear activists, meaning anti-nuclear weapon activists, had celebrated back in 2010 when the U.S. and Russia had signed an agreement to reduce their stockpiles of weapons-grade plutonium and converting them into fuel for nuclear power plants and other non-weapons uses. This is kind of the beginning of the so-called MUX fuel, which proved to be so problematic out at Fukushima. It's a blend of uranium and plutonium. And as of today, Putin has suspended that agreement. And part of it is because of the current tension and the fact that Russia may need all their weapons-grade plutonium, and the revelation that the U.S. had somehow sort of not really gotten around to doing any of the conversions required on their side. And again, the U.S. is getting a very bad reputation of never keeping their side of agreements. They did the same thing with P5+1. Iran has complied with everything in the agreement. The U.S. is still hanging on to Iran's money, and not only that, they're trying to pass laws to make it legal for American victims of terrorism to help themselves to Iran's money, even if there is no proof that Iran had anything to do with the terrorism. Same thing that they're doing with Saudi Arabia. And by the way, that's coming back to backlash on the U.S. right now. Apparently, Iran has polished up their skills to commandeer electronically drones flying illegally over their sky, and they just released a bunch of pictures of intercepted U.S. and Israeli drones. They're on display. And, of course, Iran is reverse engineering them. They're already starting to produce their own domestically produced drones based on one of the earliest U.S. drones that they captured in this way. So they're out there building all that stuff. Over in India and Pakistan, it looks like military escalation tensions are increasing, and apparently the government of India is now relocating their population along that border to be further back, and that is a huge amount of people. Indian and Pakistan troops are trading fire along the line of control in Kashmir, so that is heating up as well. Now, very bizarre story that came out of the Daily Mail, where another Holocaust survivor, they found another one, yes, the survivor of the Holocaust, who's come on out saying that Josef Mengele whistled Mozart as he selected victims for the gas chambers. Horror of horrors. Oh, we have to ban Mozart. This is getting pretty ridiculous in my mind. First of all, nobody's ever documented that there were gas chambers. But if the media is wagging Nazis at us, it means Israel's about to do something very tacky, and they're trying to rebuild their political cover that, yes, it's okay for us to behave this way today because of what happened way back in Germany before we were all born. And one of the things that they've done is that Israel sealed off the Palestinian territories for the Jewish New Year and approved new illegal settlements in the West Bank. Huge new illegal settlements. The other thing that could be building to a head is Israel has issued orders to intercept the all-woman Gaza-bound flotilla. Well, it's not really a flotilla anymore. It started as 2 ships. One of them developed mechanical difficulties and had to turn back. And we know from one of the previous flotillas, there's a possibility it was sabotaged. And what they're saying is that they will grab the boat, tow it into Ashdod Harbor. The crew will simply be deported to their home countries after they sign pledges to never return. And it doesn't matter how gently Israel treats these ladies, it still looks bad to the rest of the world. Because these boats to Gaza are not bringing in weapons or explosives or anything like that. They're bringing in medical supplies, stuff for the schools for the kids, humanitarian aid. And Israel has a policy of slow starvation of all of the people they've got in the gulags of Gaza and the West Bank. They literally calculate the minimum caloric requirement just to keep them alive, and that's all that's allowed in. Now, coming out of McClatchy News, there's been a study, the Legatum Prosperity Index, and basically what they've found is that the United States isn't a free nation anymore. In fact, on a scale of freedom, remember that Bush told us the rest of the world hates us for our freedoms, we've fallen to the 15th position. So now the terrorists will go home. They can't hate us for our freedoms. The government took our freedoms away from us. Problem solved. Now remember when I talked about how the people in Guantanamo, the prisoners, are being kept there because things were done to them that was far worse than waterboarding, things that we're not supposed to know about, and even those prisoners that have been cleared for release by the military tribunal because they didn't do anything are not being released. And we know this because one of the people who was released earlier on, Binyam Muhammad, went public with the things that were being done to him, including slicing a very delicate part of his body with a razor blade, and he was willing to show the scars. Well, apparently there's been another embarrassing revelation, and it's important to point out that this is not in that Senate CIA torture report that was released to the American people. Now, apparently in the CIA's Salt Pit prison, codename detention site Cobalt in Afghanistan, the people running that torture site built themselves a homebrew electric chair. Now, it wasn't used to execute people. It was used for torture by constant electric shock. And Lufti al-Arabi was a Tunisian man arrested in Pakistan, studying at the university. And he was in this salt pit prison for 13 years, being repeatedly subjected to electrical torture. Now, al-Najir was arrested because he was mistaken for one of Osama bin Laden's bodyguards. They didn't even have the right guy. But I'm sure with enough voltage that this guy was made to confess to shooting down the Hindenburg, or assassinating Abraham Lincoln, or personally nailing Jesus to the cross, because that's what torture does. It gets you politically convenient confessions. They had the wrong guy, and they subjected him to electric shock in this little homebrew electric chair. This is your government doing this. So let's talk about the economy, because there's a lot of things going on over there. Last week, there was a story that came on out where the Department of Justice had written off most of the fine imposed on Deutsche Bank for their part in the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud. It turns out the story was a hoax. Somebody did a pump and dump on Deutsche Bank stock. They leaked this story. They bought Deutsche Bank stock at a low price. They leaked the story. The stock went up. Somebody sold out, made themselves a quick killing. And it was all a hoax and a lie. There has been no arrangement between the Department of Justice. Deutsche Bank is still on the hook for the entire $14 billion fine for participating in the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud. It's a complete fake. And Deutsche Bank's stock has gone down, and as if that was not enough, first of all, you need to understand, any fine by the Department of Justice over $4 billion, Deutsche Bank doesn't have the reserves to cover it. It will be the end of Deutsche Bank. Now, adding to the problems, Italy has now pressed charges against several bank executives, including 6 former employees of Deutsche Bank, 2 of Japan's Nomura Bank, over fraud involving BMPS. And BMPS is already in trouble. It's one of Italy's oldest banks, one of the oldest banks in the world. It was founded in 1472. And it's trying to offload 9.2 billion euros in non-performing assets and trying to get a private bail-in of 5 billion euros. And apparently there was false accounting, share manipulation, obstructing regulators. And this massive fraud being committed by all these bankers, to me, is a signal that the real traditional economy of jobs and people working at jobs and getting money to buy products and cars and homes and everything has already crashed. It's already locked up. And fraud is the last resort by the bankers to keep themselves wealthy before the final crash. We're there. They're all surviving by fraud because they can't make money the old-fashioned way anymore. Because the nation has been plundered. Americans don't have anything left. Europeans have nothing left. The money junkies have all the money and still their hands are out saying, you must give us more. We don't have it. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economy. Somebody just sent me an article that declassified emails reveal NATO killed Gaddafi to stop the creation of the gold dinar. You can't have a value-based currency. Our worthless paper money will be worthless. So, now then, getting on back to Deutsche Bank. Needless to say, the revelation that the DOJ rollback on the fine was a fake, coupled with the arrests, have driven Deutsche Bank shares even further down. Deutsche Bank has lost over 90% of its value since their peak in April of 2007. Now, apparently, people are unable to pull their cash out of Deutsche Bank. The big hedge fund people are already getting their money out. Margin calls are going on out. Ordinary Deutsche Bank customers, though, are unable to get their cash from the ATM machines. But we're being told it's just an IT problem. Really, there's no reason to think the bank is insolvent or has hit a liquidity crisis. It's just a glitch. The customers want their money out of a failing bank. It's not failing, but it's just a glitch, really. Yeah, sure. Everything's going to be okay. Now, Paul Gambles, who's a managing partner at advisory firm MBMG International, is saying at this point, Deutsche needs a miracle to survive. It's just looking for a place to fall down and die right now. Now, remember that big stink over Wells Fargo, where they were caught creating accounts in the name of some of their wealthier customers without their permission, to churn the accounts, to charge fees, to meet sales goals. 5,000 Wells Fargo employees got fired for it. None of the executives did. The one who was in charge of that department retired with a golden parachute of $140 million. The CEO refused to resign. Well, now it turns out Morgan Stanley was playing the same game. The state of Massachusetts has charged Morgan Stanley with dishonest and unethical conduct related to high-pressure sales contests involving cross-selling. Like I said, when the banking system as a whole is engaging in this much fraud, it tells us that the traditional economy of people working at decent-paying jobs and turning that money back into the economy by buying goods and services has already locked up. Now, the Dutch bank ING is slashing 7,000 jobs and closing branches. They're in trouble. Now, we were talking the other day about the Hanjin shipping bankruptcy. There's a surplus of shipping capacity. Too few people are shipping goods. It's driving shipping prices down. Maybe more bankruptcies there. Japan's Kawasaki Heavy Industries is saying they may get out of shipbuilding entirely because they can't get a profit anymore. And here's where it shows just how desperate things are getting. Over in Saudi Arabia, amazingly enough, they have been with this traditional Arabic calendar. Now they're finally agreeing to switch over to the Gregorian calendar that we all use, because apparently it will mean civil servants will lose 11 days of pay. And so they're switching to the Gregorian calendar to try and control costs and the budget deficit over there. Saudi Arabia's economy was absolutely wrecked by this ill-considered oil price war. And now the U.S. wants to just loot Saudi Arabia by saying they had something to do with 9/11. It really is ridiculous. U.S. manufacturing has slowed to a crawl in September. New orders hit a 9-month low. And this is when everybody's supposed to be buying up for the holiday shopping season. U.S. construction spending has gone into contraction for the first time in 5 years. The restaurant industry, which is the leading indicator of the U.S. consumer economy, is going into the Al-Qaeda. Bankruptcies are piling up. Restaurants are closing. Mom and pop places, chains, everything. It's all locked up and coming apart. We'll be right back. And the phone lines are still closed because I got a lot of stuff to get through here, and I apologize. We're talking about the economy here, and now we're hearing that J.P. Morgan is joining together with Janet Yellen and with Summers, saying that it may be time for the Federal Reserve to directly buy stocks themselves. Right now, they use that stock market as a banner to reassure you the economy is doing just swell. Even goes all the way back to President Bill Clinton, who created the plunge protection team to always drive that market up so they could say, hey, it's the economy, stupid. We're doing really good. We're great here. And it isn't. Now, the Fed is just going to create money out of thin air, and they will buy stocks with it to manipulate the market and force it to go higher. And as a reminder, if you or I did anything like this, we would be in jail. But, of course, bankers are above the law in the United States of America. Even when they're caught red-handed with fraud, they're never arrested, they're never charged. They get wrist-slap deals from Loretta Lynch. And then you, the ordinary American, are plundered to cover the losses from their failures. Now, there's a story out of SHTFplan.com saying that the October surprise may not be what Julian Assange is about to release, but it may be a sudden economic meltdown because it's close enough where they can't keep it under control. Yes, they can drive the stock market up, but if we start seeing Deutsche Bank fail, the derivatives kick in and there's a domino effect. That could change the election because Hillary's out there saying everything's fine because that's what Obama and the Democrats have been saying. It's all fine. If you just work harder, everything will be okay. We only got a 5% unemployment. If it comes apart, it is going to be unavoidable that the U.S. government as a whole has been lying to you, the American people, about the state of the economy. And that will put Donald Trump into the White House. Nobody will believe a Hillary Clinton victory. No matter how much the corporate media assures us that, yes, Hillary can fix the economy. But, you know, as Donald Trump was saying in a different context, the Democrats have had 30 years to fix this problem. They haven't. The professional politicians have had 30 years to fix this problem. They haven't. It's time for an outsider, a businessman, to come on in and put the U.S. back on a business-like footing. And that means the crooked bankers go to jail, like they did up in Iceland. Or, can't fault the Chinese or the Iranians for this. They execute their crooked bankers. Now, as you know, there's a big stink going on about the Pentagon asking for another $1 trillion in funding to maintain parity with Russia and China at a time when they seem to have misplaced over $6 trillion. That's a lot of money. But apparently, it's now so bad. There's an article that came on out. This is Reuters, no less, reporting that the U.S. Army's been fudging its accounts all along to make it look like the books are balanced. Nobody knows where that money has gone. And nobody knows for certain that money that is listed as spent on a certain item actually went for it. They're just cooking the books to make it look like everything's hunky-dory so they can come back and ask for more of your money. Now, if you live in Minnesota, you better brace yourself on this one. The Obamacare premiums are going to jump 50%. because the Obamacare exchanges up there are on the edge of collapse. It's a complete disaster. But as government will always do, they never admit failing. They never admit they made a mistake. They'll just prop it up with as much of your money as it takes to keep things going so they can say, this is Obama's signature legislative achievement, is Obamacare. Over in Greece, the pensioners are protesting over the fact that the austerity imposed by the European Union and the European Central Bank basically says retirees are going to get shorted. These are people who've spent their life working, paying into the system, and now that they need the system is saying, I'm sorry, we got to take your money and give it to the bankers up there in Brussels. You know, get used to eating dog food or something like that. So they're understandably angry and upset. And the police are using tear gas and pepper spray on these old people. Now, talking about immigration, over in Germany, mayor of a town was literally beaten unconscious by locals after announcing a plan to bring the migrants in. We have to open our borders and just let them flood on in. And the German people said, no, we've actually gone about as far along that line as we're going to go. Now, a lot of people were very worried about all this talk coming out of Brussels about creating a European army, which would supersede the military forces of the European Union member nations. Basically, it looked like a power grab to have a Brussels army that would bring those European Union members back into line if they dared talk about leaving. Well, the European Union has come on out and said, actually, it's not going to happen. They're broke, and they can't actually pay to build a new European army. So where's all this money going that's owed? All these trillions of dollars and pounds and euros. Where's it all vanishing to? It's going into the pockets of the money junkies. And it doesn't matter how much they get. They're still addicted. They got to have more. It isn't how much money they've got that they get that little cocaine-like thrill from. It's how much came in today. I need a new fix. So, now apparently up in New York, there's a problem because, as you know, one of the side effects of our open borders immigration policy being pushed by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama is that gangs, criminal gangs, are coming into this country and setting up shop. And one of the worst is MS-13. Go out and Google them. These are bad, bad people. And literally, we've had 1/5 of the population of El Salvador, which is considered the murder capital of the world, into the U.S. All of a sudden, people are showing up dead. And apparently, MS-13 has been dumping the dead bodies near an elementary school. And needless to say, the people of New York are thinking, you know, maybe this open borders thing wasn't really such a good idea. Between drug gangs moving in, contagious diseases that had been eradicated in this country being reintroduced. So what are we going to do about this crisis? Well, Duke University knows how to solve the problem. Absolutely. Duke University has launched a program to make males hate masculinity. We're going to make men hate the idea of masculinity. We want them to learn to love being sissies. Needless to say, it's being hosted by the Campus Women's Center. And for this, your kids are going $30,000, $40,000 into student loan debt so that the guys can be told that they should feel bad about being guys. Now, I can imagine the Campus Women's Center outrage if somebody came on in and said, we need a program to make girls hate femininity. They'd probably actually like it, because that was a big part of the feminist agenda in the 1990s. You shouldn't act like a girl. Men shouldn't act like men. And again, this gets back to that whole liberal idea that you can reshape what's in the mind of people by reshaping the environment around them, and it never, ever works because it's based on an intellectual fraud. Remember the heyday of unisex and this idea that we're going to go into all the preschools and have gender-neutral toys and free people from those stereotypes. And the little boys continue to act like little boys, and the little girls continue to act like little girls, and the liberals were saying, I don't understand this. We should be able to reprogram their minds by changing the environment around them. It's based on an intellectual fraud. It all goes back to Margaret Mead and her book, Coming of Age in Samoa, which portrayed the Samoan culture as free of the emotional angst of adolescence and supported the idea of tabula rasa, that you are born with an absolutely blank mind and everything that you are is learned. And it was a fraud. Margaret Mead wrote an intellectual fraud. She based everything that was in her book on conversations with two young ladies she made friends. And the Samoan culture tries to be polite. They love to talk story. The girls told Margaret Mead what Margaret Mead wanted to hear, and she made easily documented mistakes there. Margaret Mead claimed that the culture of Samoa, at the time she was researching the book, was sexually promiscuous, because the culture here in Hawaii at that time was sexually promiscuous. And she blew it. The Samoan culture has always been rigidly monogamous. And the Samoan kids go through the same angst during adolescence as anybody else. And the entire liberal philosophical view is founded on this fraud. Now, over in Virginia, there was a teenager, middle school student, was handcuffed, arrested, and charged with larceny for stealing a 65-cent carton of milk from the cafeteria. Turns out he was on the school's free lunch program anyway. And they handcuffed and arrest this kid, charge him with larceny. But the Wall Street bankers committing fraud and Hillary committing felony violations of Title 18, they get off scot-free. Is this a great country or what? All righty, I've had a caller call on in. It was one of the things I wanted to get to, and I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to it. We were talking about this ridiculous law that would allow the people in the U.S. to sue Saudi Arabia for losses of 9/11, and all it would take would be a judge saying, I believe Saudi Arabia was behind 9/11, help yourself to their money. And it's had repercussions. Saudi Arabia is threatening consequences. Obama vetoed it. One of the few things he's done I agreed with. Congress overrode the veto because their lords and masters in Tel Aviv said to, and it's already having a backlash. Iraq is now suing the United States of America under that law for war crimes, including the invasion of Iraq based on the lie of nuclear weapons of mass destruction. Talk about hoisting with your own petard. These people in Washington, D.C., they don't think. Somebody hands them a check and says, you're going to do this. And they go, yes, master, I will hear and obey. They don't think these things through. That is the biggest failing of our government. And it's, once again, when you have a government that's become corrupted by drug money or corporate money or Israel money, they stop thinking. They're not thinking about what's good for the nation. It's just how do they get that next fix of a check coming in with lots of zeros on it. Anybody who has ever been at sea sailing knows that you can't take your hand off that helm or you'll be in trouble. And we've had an entire city of Washington, D.C. took their hands off the helm of the ship of state so they could have both hands out there for checks. And look where our nation is today. I don't know about you. I am thoroughly ashamed of what this government has become and what it does. And they do not represent me. And because we do not have honest, fair, and verifiable elections in this country, if Hillary Clinton is declared empress by imperial edict, I'm not going to go along with that. I will not recognize or acknowledge or cede any of my freedoms to an illegal, illegitimate government. Washington, D.C. is in dire need of an enema. All righty, now then, let's see. More stuff coming in about Italy getting ready, getting braced for Deutsche Bank's possible collapse. It's always going to be those derivatives. All right, let's talk about Windows 10. The boys at Microsoft have done it again. Apparently there's been another update to Windows 10, a cumulative update, and it's been a disaster because apparently for most of the computers getting this update, it won't install. It cripples your existing Windows 10, and then it goes into an endless cycle of reboots and retries. Basically, your machine is useless at this point. And people are angry because apparently the beta testers of this update were saying this is an issue. It won't install. And for whatever reason, Microsoft jammed it on through anyway. Now, Vladimir Putin, let's give him a round of applause. He has just banned Microsoft from Russia. And he's put Bill Gates on a Federal Security Service watch list. Because of concerns over security and reliability, especially that second one, Putin has ordered the removal of all Microsoft software in Russia to begin immediately. There's a golden opportunity for somebody to step on in with a new operating system. Now, another big problem that's out there is the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things botnet turns out to have a vulnerability inside. Security blogger Hacker Fantastic actually came on out and said it's very easy to create the biggest DOS attack in history using these Internet of Things processors, and you can't patch them. The code is hardwired into the chip. You cannot correct this, and they're all over the place, and they've already been used to mount huge denial of service attacks. It's just out there. Now, John McAfee was in a store recently, and he saw one of these new refrigerators that's part of the Internet of Things, and it's hooked into the Internet. And apparently, in this store, with kids around, the display on the refrigerator was showing videos and pictures from a pornography website. Little bit of an oopsie there. I think this Internet of Things, I mean, it's the fact that it's a threat aside, I think it's like 4K TV or 3D TV. It's going to be a flash in the pan, and most people are going to realize it's more trouble than it's worth. There are some things I want to have computers in. There's a lot of things I really don't want computer chips in. Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program on this Monday. And I'm looking at this article that just went across my desk, and we posted it to WhatReallyHappened.com under the Bex Alert banner. And the gist of this story, which is all coming from U.S. military-industrial complex experts, is that North Korea's 2 satellites they have in orbit may secretly contain super miniaturized EMP weapons. And, of course, this is followed by all these dire warnings of all the terrible things that could happen unless we are willing to give the Pentagon more money to protect against orbiting EMP weapons. There are a couple of problems with the story. One is the satellites are really too small to be carrying nuclear weapons. That's why they had to super miniaturize, but we know that North Korea's nuclear weapons are actually very large, very early primitive state. This is a beg for more money by throwing scary monsters at you. Or alternatively, they finally figured out the big bang that will start World War III for real, which is they're going to EMP their own country and say, it was North Korea did it, we have to have war on North Korea right now. Because we can see day after day after day how desperate they are to get a real bloody hot war going, to distract the American people from how badly managed our nation has been over the last 30 years. And we know that all these other catalyzing events for these other wars turned out to be hoaxes and frauds. The Lusitania was carrying weapons. There was no Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. There were no torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. Pearl Harbor was not a surprise. Roosevelt spent all of 1941 goading the Japanese into the attack. Our government is trapped by their view of history, because every time the U.S. government gets the economy into a hopeless mess, they get into a war, not necessarily to fix it, but to have somebody to blame for it, and as a distraction by the American people. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and we are on the brink of this new war. Now, what allowed the United States to be on the winning side in big mistake number one and big mistake number two was we were a powerhouse of manufacturing. We don't have that anymore. We don't have those things that made the U.S. able to be on the winning side. We're going to lose this one, people, if we let it happen. So, very, very scary times, and they're in a rush because they're thinking Trump might actually win the White House, and he's just going to spoil the party. He's going to call up Russia and China and say, let's be friends again. Let's go back to doing business. Russia and China are going to say, sure, that's what we want to do. And that military-industrial complex is going to have their allowance cut for behaving as badly as they have. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back here tomorrow, Tuesday, on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, you are all part of the independent media. Take what you learn here, take what you learn from the website, and share it with your friends gently. Don't overwhelm them. Don't scare them. But we need to get the word on out, because the future, not just of the United States, but of the very planet, hangs in the balance. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.